Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us a stack of sources focused on, well, one of the oldest human activities, storytelling. Our mission today is to distill the essential wisdom about narratives, not just as entertainment, but as a really indispensable tool for education. We're looking past simple literacy here,
Yeah.
aiming for sophisticated reasoning.
Precisely. And we're challenging that conventional classroom view. The core question, really, for you listening is this. When we formalize storytelling across the curriculum, does it actually prove itself? Is it a powerful, practical, pedagogical resource that, specifically nurtures advanced analytical capacity?
We have some incredibly rich source material today. Yeah, we're analyzing research on teacher and student perceptions, including a fascinating study from Singapore, quite revealing, alongside empirical data on language acquisition, and importantly, specific practical frameworks for actually getting these narratives integrated into a, let's face it, rigorous classroom schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately. Starting with the big picture, right? Our sources consistently note the broad humanistic power of story.
Yeah.
It's the bedrock of human communication, going back centuries, fostering inspiration, building community connections.
And this is where the magic happens cognitively. Stories, they operate differently from, say, traditional lectures or just fact sheets. They move beyond mere inspiration. They become a sophisticated training ground for the mind. So when students encounter characters or complicated ideas, maybe unfamiliar circumstances within a narrative structure, they are forced to process, analyze, and evaluate those situations.
Okay.
This immersion is precisely where critical thinking gets nurtured. You're practicing that high-level skill of processing ambiguity and nuance.
That makes sense conceptually, but let me introduce a little skepticism here based on the sources. We often hear about role-playing, right, for creative problem solving. One example they cited was dividing a class into groups, giving them this high-stakes, spontaneous scenario like, okay, you're pirates lost at sea, but how do we prove that activity teaches a higher level of analytical capacity than, say, a standard formal debate exercise?
That's an excellent point. Yeah, that gets right to the heart of narrative pedagogy. The difference, I think, is the holistic requirement. In a debate, you're often defending one established position with facts. Pretty linear.
Right.
In the pirate scenario, you are evaluating circumstances, analyzing character motivations, and synthesizing disparate information like limited resources, group morale, immediate danger to find a solution that maximizes a non-binary outcome. It's messy.
Oh, okay.
The sources show this fosters creative and complex problem solving because the analysis is interwoven with those socio-emotional challenges.
So it's like an empathy engine combined with a logic puzzle.
Absolutely. That socio-emotional aspect is critical. Storytelling nurtures empathy, letting students be in someone else's shoes through that kind of dramatic play.
Yeah.
And furthermore, stories are just the most effective way to convey abstract principles and, build character. Well, concepts like honesty, or in some cultures, this idea of filial piety, that deep respect and obligation to elders, they're complex, really difficult to just define on a whiteboard.
Sure.
But within a compelling narrative, the outcome of those moral choices becomes clear, memorable, it sticks.
That's a powerful point about memory and abstraction.
Yeah.
I also appreciate the emphasis on honoring self-determination. The research suggests that when you allow students agency, letting them choose topics, characters, specific challenges within a story, they make a deeper personal connection to the material.
Yes, and that personal connection is a direct pipeline to better learning. When students invest in themselves, they're more willing to confront situations where there isn't just one right answer, where there are multiple ways to solve a problem. And if we connect this to the broader frame of student well-being, that sense of school connectedness, feeling that teachers and peers care about your learning, it's directly linked to academic success. When a student sees their own lived experience or their chosen narrative reflected in the classroom, that sense of belonging just solidifies.
Right. It makes school feel relevant.
So we've established the philosophical grounding, the cognitive benefits, but does all this emotional and analytical engagement actually translate into hard, measurable linguistic improvement?
The big question.
It is. And the data is pretty unequivocal. Stories are cited throughout our research stack as a major and constant source of language experience for children.
Let's get granular on the skill gains because this is where it gets really interesting. The sources detail measurable improvements, especially in vocabulary and fluency. Students acquire a, quote, wide variety of natural language and rich vocabulary simply by listening and internalizing stories.
And here is a truly impactful insight from the research. There was one empirical study comparing two groups of, I think, 7 to 11-year-olds.
Right.
One group was told stories like orally delivered. The other group was read the same stories directly from a book.
Right.
The group that heard the oral told stories scored significantly higher in vocabulary acquisition and comprehension.
Wow, significantly higher. That distinction telling versus reading?
Mm-hmm.
That seems vital then. We'd say it's huge, but why? Why is the human oral delivery so much more effective than just reading the same words off a page?
Well, it seems to come down to dynamism and feedback. When a teacher is telling a story, they're performing, essentially. They're modulating their voice, using varied intonation, making eye contact, using gestures, nonverbal cues, and often making small, spontaneous vocabulary choices based on the immediate reaction of the listeners. You see their faces, you adjust.
Ah, like a real-time calibration.
Exactly. It creates this feedback loop that reading from a book just can't replicate. The language acquisition becomes intensely personal, contextualized, not static.
So it turns what could be passive reception of language into an active, almost incidental learning experience. This must apply to grammar too, I imagine.
Exactly right. The learning is incidental. Stories expose students to advanced syntactic structures, the proper use of past tense, complex sentence connectors, prepositions like over and under, contractions, all in a memorable context. It's not a dry worksheet drill. You're absorbing structure by immersion.
And crucially, this translates directly to reading comprehension. The sources say storytelling activities aid both literal understanding and that inferential comprehension, that higher-level skill reading between the lines. It helps children internalize the story schema.
Story schema, yeah. It's basically a mental roadmap for narrative. That internalized expectation about how a plot usually sequences. Beginning, rising action, climax, resolution. The usual arc.
Right, the structure.
Once children internalize this framework through repeated exposure to stories, they approach new reading material with established expectations. It dramatically improves their ability to organize and recall details.
And this confidence presumably builds expressive language skills, too.
Absolutely. Listening refines their awareness of rhythm, intonation, pronunciation. But it's the retelling of those stories, which is often part of the process, that really sharpens oral accuracy, fluency, and just general communication confidence.
And finally, it feeds into writing as well.
Yes. Storytelling gives students a robust framework for composition. It improves their ability to structure a plot, handle paragraphing logically, and encourages them to use more descriptive language, more evocative details. It gives them a model.
Okay, now we arrive at this great paradox revealed in the sources, specifically that perception research from the Singapore study. All this evidence that storytelling works, and apparently everyone enjoys it. On the student side, the enthusiasm is almost unanimous. 98.3% enjoyed listening to or reading stories, and 96.6% explicitly wanted their teachers to use stories to teach English skills. They cited the fun, the interest factor.
And the teachers. Equally convinced, perception-wise, all 34 teachers surveyed had a positive perception of storytelling as a teaching tool. 100% agreement that this is a valuable method.
So everyone's on board.
Which is where the massive inconsistency strikes.
Wait, let me make sure I heard that right. One of Mike Throst's the teachers agreed storytelling was a great tool, but nearly 9 out of 34 still refused, or at least didn't integrate it into their actual language lessons.
That's correct.
That gap between belief and action is, well, it's profoundly frustrating. What on earth is preventing them if they believe it works?
It's a classic example, really, of systemic barriers overriding best practice. And while this study focuses on Singapore, the constraints they cite, they're pretty universal pedagogical challenges. Teachers face them globally.
So what were those constraints specifically? What did they say?
The primary barrier, cited by 2/3 of the non-users, was syllabus pressure and the undue emphasis on examination results. High-stakes testing culture.
No, usual suspects.
Pretty much. Storytelling was perceived as too time-consuming. It prevented them, or they felt it prevented them, from covering the required testable curriculum material. It's a pressure that forces them toward what's easily quantifiable, rather than what might be deeply effective.
So it sounds less like they lack the will and more like they lack the administrative permission or maybe the time to prioritize it.
That and confidence. That was a secondary but crucial barrier. A lack of skill or maybe confidence in how exactly to relate storytelling to specific, measurable language outcomes. They tended to view storytelling as something you do purely for tuning in or arousing interest, like a fun 5 minutes at the start of class.
Yeah, a warm-up.
Right. Rather than seeing it as a core pedagogical method that could be formally integrated and assessed throughout the lesson itself. The good news here is that the sources do offer clear strategies to bridge this gap. They show that storytelling can be highly structured, it can be measurable. Active engagement is vital, moving beyond just passive listening. We talked about role playing. Teachers who successfully integrated storytelling use techniques like full dramatization, often as a pre-writing activity.
How does that actually work in a structured way, though? Is it just, students running around being pirates again?
Aha, no, far from it. A successful technique cited was this free screen concept. Students act out a climactic scene from a story, and the teacher calls freeze. They have to hold their pose, their expression. The teacher then uses that frozen tableau, that image, as the subject for a picture composition exercise. It helps generate specific descriptive vocabulary, plot ideas, right there for the writing exercise that follows.
Ah, I see. It links the creative, physical part directly to a measurable writing outcome. Very clever.
It makes the connection explicit. And beyond physical dramatization, there are analytical tools too.
Like what?
Well, the successful teachers use tools that force cognitive analysis within the narrative framework. Things like creative vocabulary maps to track rich language from the story, visual mapping to outline plot development, book reviews that require actual evaluation, and these things called comprehension cubes.
Comprehension cues.
Yeah, they're like dice with questions on each face prompts for before, during, and after engaging with the text. It structures the thinking process around the story.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and very modern. Our sources highlight integrating artificial intelligence tools. How do platforms like storygenerator.io or Jasper AI fit into this? Isn't that just cheating?
It's scaffolding, not cheating. Well, if used correctly, that's the key. These tools can help students overcome what you might call plot paralysis.
Right, the blank page problem.
Exactly. When a student has a character idea but just can't figure out the rising action or what happens next, they can use the AI to co-create. It can flesh out characters, suggest several plot pathways.
Then the student has to choose.
Precisely. The student must then analyze those AI-generated options, select the best one, and crucially, justify that decision. It transforms the difficulty of initial composition into an exercise in high-level selection and revision. It focuses their energy on complex problem-solving about the narrative.
Got it. So the technology handles some of the basic mechanics, allowing the student to focus their analytical capacity on the structure, the choices. Makes sense. But to overcome those major systemic obstacles we discussed, skill deficits. What support do the teachers actually say they need?
They were very clear on this. First and foremost, professional development. Training. Both for current teachers, pre-service, and in-service. Focused explicitly on storytelling facilitation skills.
Not just the why, but the how.
Exactly. They need training not just on why storytelling is good, but how to structure it, how to assess it against curricular goals, how to make it fit.
And that leads directly to the crucial administrative support, I guess.
Absolutely. They requested formal curricular support, meaning storytelling needs to be explicitly written into the syllabus, not just treated as an optional extra that gets dropped when exam pressure inevitably mounts.
Right. Make it official.
And they need administrative support in the form of resources like time off to attend that training we just mentioned, maybe funds for props, scripts, things to make the dramatic elements viable in a real classroom.
Practical needs.
Yes. And finally, collegial support was mentioned. Things like peer observation, maybe group preparation of teaching materials, just to build collective confidence and reduce that individual time burden.
By
sharing the load.
It really sounds like the system itself needs to recognize the evidence and then restructure to align with what both students and teachers intuitively know works best for deeper learning. It's about enabling them.
The research certainly suggests the payoff is more than worth the structural effort required. #outro.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? Our deep dive today confirms that storytelling is, well, empirically proven to be a profoundly effective tool. It boosts both language acquisition and sophisticated reasoning. Plus, it's universally loved by students. That came through loud and clear. Yet these logistical constraints, and maybe a lack of specific training or confidence, remain the primary barriers to its widespread, structured implementation in schools.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Given that really striking finding that active oral storytelling is significantly more effective for vocabulary and comprehension than merely reading stories aloud from a book.
Yeah, that was huge.
What subtle but systematic change could you implement today? Maybe in your teaching, if you teach or mentoring, or even just in your professional communication. How could you transform those casual narrative moments into more structured, perhaps even quantifiable learning opportunities? Something to think about.